Welcome to Headstones and Microphones, Founder Stories, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched, first-person simulation of history's most visionary founders. I am your host, Calvin. While we've added some creative storytelling, our goal is to inspire your own study of these trailblazers. Now, let's meet our guest. Today, we are sitting down with a man who didn't invent the fast food restaurant, but entirely revolutionized the way the world eats, builds franchises, and thinks about real estate. He took a single, hyper-efficient California burger stand and scaled it into a global empire. Please welcome to the microphone the legendary force behind the McDonald's Corporation, Mr. Ray Kroc. Ray, it is an absolute honor to have you here.
Well, thank you, Calvin. I'm grateful for the chance to talk shop with you today, so fire away.
Love the energy, Ray. Let's dive right in. You spent decades on the road selling paper cups and multi-mixer milkshake machines before you ever got into the burger business. What was the exact moment you realized society was moving in a direction only you could see? And how did you convince those early skeptics who thought you were crazy to start a new venture in your 50s?
Oh, it was 1954, Calvin, and I was 52 years old, traveling all over the country. I was seeing these traditional drive-ins struggling, with car hops running around, orders getting mixed up, and dishes breaking. Then, I got this massive order for 8 multi-mixers from a little joint out in San Bernardino, California, run by Dick and Mac McDonald. I had to see it for myself. When I got there, my jaw dropped. People were lining up around the block. There were no car hops, no plates, no silverware, just a streamlined, beautifully simple operation pushing out hot burgers, fries, and shakes in seconds. I realized right then and there that the American public was moving towards speed, cleanliness, and absolute consistency. The skeptics thought I was out of my mind. My wife, my close friends, they all reminded me of my age, my diabetes, my arthritis. They told me to play it safe. But I told them, look, I am not a guy who sits on the sidelines. This thing is going to be nationwide. I didn't try to argue with them too much. I just put my nose to the grindstone and let the results do the talking.
That takes serious guts. Leaving behind the safety of a steady sales career at that stage in life to build something entirely unproven is a massive gamble. What did your life look like the day you decided to go all in on McDonald's? And what was the core belief that gave you the courage to take that first step?
To be perfectly honest, Calvin, my life was a frantic, exhausting hustle. I was still running Prince Castle Sales, my multi-mixer business, trying to keep the lights on while simultaneously flying back and forth to open the first franchise location in Des Plaines, Illinois. I was mortgaging my house, borrowing money from the bank, and putting every single penny I had into this dream. I was working dawn till dusk, sweeping the parking lots myself, cleaning the vats, and making sure the windows gleamed. What gave me the courage? It was a bone-deep conviction that if you give the customer a quality product, served with lightning speed in a spotless environment, you cannot lose. I believed in the absolute perfection of the McDonald Brothers system, and I knew that if I could replicate that standard precisely across the country, it would be a goldmine. I always say, if you're green, you're growing, and if you're ripe, you rot. I wasn't ready to rot.
If you're green, you're growing. I love that. In the absolute beginning, when you had no data, no capital, and no blueprint for a massive national chain, what was the one truth you held onto that everyone else around you dismissed?
Everyone thought a 15-cent hamburger was a cheap gimmick that couldn't sustain a real business. They dismissed it as a passing fad. But the truth I held onto was that consistency is the ultimate currency. I knew that a truck driver in Illinois, a family in Indiana, or a businessman in California all wanted the exact same thing. They wanted to know exactly what they were getting, and they wanted it to taste identical every single time, without surprises. People dismissed the idea that you could control quality on a massive scale through strict franchising rules. They thought operators would just do whatever they wanted. But I knew that if I picked the right people and instilled a fanatic devotion to the system, the uniformity itself would become our greatest asset.
It sounds like a beautifully simple vision, but I know it wasn't all smooth sailing. Long before the company became a household name, you hit a wall where everything nearly collapsed financially. Take us back to that first major failure or setback. What went wrong, and how did you find the willpower to restart?
Oh, the financial squeeze in the late 50s was brutal, Calvin. I had signed a contract with the McDonald brothers that gave me the right to franchise, but it left me with a microscopic fraction of the profits, just a tiny percentage of the gross sales. Out of that, I had to pay for administration, advertising, and development. We were opening stores, the public loved the food, the registers were ringing, and yet I was completely broke. I couldn't pay my top guys, I was drowning in debt, and the banks were breathing down my neck. I felt like I was running a marathon on a treadmill. But then, a brilliant man named Harry Sonneborn came into my life. He looked at our books and said, "Ray, you're not in the burger business, you're in the real estate business." We started buying up the land under the franchises and leasing it back to the operators. That saved us. It gave us the steady cash flow and the leverage we needed to survive and grow. The willpower came from sheer refusal to let those golden arches fall after working so hard to put them up.
That real estate pivot was pure genius, Ray. Now, innovation often looks like madness to contemporaries. Was there a specific product, philosophy, or strategy you were utterly convinced would work, but the public, or even your own team, initially rejected or ridiculed? How did you respond?
Well, look at the Filet-O-Fish. One of our early operators, Lou Groen out in Cincinnati, was losing business on Fridays because he was in a heavily Catholic area and people weren't eating meat. He wanted to sell a fish sandwich. I was totally against it at first because I was terrified of the smell and the logistics, and I wanted to push my own idea, the hula burger, which was a slice of grilled pineapple and cheese on a bun. We had a friendly competition. The public took one bite of the hula burger and completely rejected it. But they absolutely loved Lou's fish sandwich. I had to swallow my pride, drop my pineapple burger, and roll out the Filet-O-Fish nationwide. It became a massive hit. You have to listen to the market and your operators, even when it bruises your ego.
Behind the legendary name, you were a human being facing immense pressure, whether from financial panics, internal friction with the McDonald brothers, or personal doubt. How did you shoulder that burden without letting the vision splinter?
It took a toll, there's no denying that. The friction with Dick and Mac McDonald was incredibly stressful. They were cautious, content with their one perfect store, and they resisted almost every change or expansion idea I brought to the table. It felt like I was constantly fighting with handcuffs on. To shoulder that burden, I poured every ounce of my frustration into the work itself. I became completely obsessed with perfection. If I was stressed, I didn't sit around and mope. I went out to a store, inspected the kitchen, talked to the crew, and made sure the fries were crisp. Work was my therapy. I also surrounded myself with a fiercely loyal team, people like Fred Turner and Harry Sonneborn, who picked up the slack where I couldn't. You can't carry an empire on one pair of shoulders. You need a crew that believes in the flag just as much as you do.
Speaking of your team, let's talk about the first true believers. Who were the very first people, beyond your immediate family, to buy into what you were doing? And how did you convince those early workers or customers to trust an entirely unproven concept?
My first real right-hand man was Fred Turner. He was a young guy who originally wanted to open a franchise, but he ended up working with me directly, defining our operations, and eventually becoming the president of the company. He just got it. To convince early operators and workers, I didn't sell them a dream of getting rich quick. I sold them a system of hard work and mutual success. I told them, if you succeed, I succeed. I'm not going to make money selling you expensive supplies. I'm going to make money when you sell burgers to the public. That honesty built immense trust. For the customers, the convincing was done by the cleanliness of the stores. In those days, fast food places had a reputation for being greasy and chaotic. When families saw our clean parking lots, our well-groomed staff in white shirts, and the speed of the service, they became instant believers.
Can you take us to the exact tipping point where you felt the momentum shift? What was the specific milestone or breakthrough where you realized, we aren't just going to survive, we are going to change everything?
The real tipping point was in 1961, when we finally bought out the McDonald brothers completely for $2.7 million. It was an astronomical sum of money for us at the time, and it felt like pulling teeth to get the financing. But the moment that deal was signed, the shackles were off. We owned the name, the system, and the rights entirely. Right around that same time, we opened Hamburger University in the basement of a restaurant in Elk Grove Village, Illinois, to formally train our managers and operators. That was the moment I knew we were unstoppable. We weren't just a collection of burger joints anymore. We were a highly sophisticated, standardized educational and corporate institution. We were setting the global standard for the entire food industry.
Hamburger University is legendary. You didn't just build a company, you built a distinct culture and philosophy that outlasted your time at the helm. In the early days, when it was just a handful of people in a room, how did you instill that standard of excellence and service?
You instill it by living it yourself, Calvin. You don't just write a manual and sit in a fancy corporate office. In the early days, if I saw a piece of paper on the ground outside a store, I'd bend down and pick it up. If a manager saw the boss picking up trash, you bet your life he'd make sure his crew did the same. We pounded QSC and V into everybody's heads: quality, service, cleanliness, and value. It became a religion to us. We kept the menu small and focused so we could do those few things better than anyone else on earth. We treated our operators as partners, not just cogs in a machine. When you give people a sense of pride in their ownership and show them that the standard of excellence is non-negotiable from the very top down, it embeds itself right into the DNA of the company.
History books often flatten a person's life into a neat, polished narrative. What would you say is the biggest misconception people have about your journey, your character, or how McDonald's was actually built?
A lot of people look at me and see an quote-unquote overnight success. They see a guy who walked into a burger joint, snapped his fingers, and became a billionaire. That completely flattens 30 years of hard, grinding, unglamorous sales work before I ever even heard the name McDonald's. I was an overnight success, all right, but 30 years is a damn long night. Another misconception is that I was just a ruthless corporate raider who stole a business. The truth is, Dick and Mac had a wonderful local operation, but they didn't want the headaches of national expansion. I took their brilliant spark, invested my life savings, took all the financial risks, and built the engine that brought it to the world. It was a monumental amount of grit, sweat, and sleepless nights, not just a lucky break.
30 years is a long night indeed. Building an empire always requires a steep personal cost. Looking back at the entirety of your life, what was the hardest sacrifice you had to make for the sake of your vision? And was it ultimately worth it?
The hardest sacrifice was undoubtedly the strain on my personal life and my first marriage. I was so completely consumed by McDonald's, so fanatically obsessed with building the business, that I had very little time or energy left for anything else. It caused a massive rift, and my first marriage ended in divorce. I missed out on a lot of quiet, normal moments because I was always living out of a suitcase or running a restaurant. Looking back, was it worth it? From a business and legacy standpoint, absolutely. We created opportunities for thousands of independent franchise owners to achieve their own American dreams, and we fed millions of people. But anyone who tells you that building a global empire doesn't come with a heavy personal price tag is lying to you.
If you could send a single sentence back through time to yourself on the very first day you started this venture, knowing every trial, triumph, and heartbreak that awaited you, what would you say?
I'd tell myself, Ray, press on, because nothing in the world can take the place of persistence.
Wow, that is incredibly powerful, Ray. Before we sign off today, do you have any closing remarks about this interview or the stories you shared that you'd like to leave with our listeners?
I just want to say that no matter what your age is, and no matter how many times you've stumbled along the way, if you have a burning passion and you're willing to work harder than anyone else in the room, the opportunity is out there. Don't let anyone tell you it's too late to start. Calvin, this has been an absolute blast. Thank you so much for having me on the show and letting an old salesman tell his stories one more time.
Ray, thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, and your incredible energy. What a phenomenal ride through the mind of one of history's greatest builders. From discovering a single burger stand in San Bernardino to transforming it into a global symbol of consistency and enterprise, Ray Kroc showed us all what it truly means to press on with relentless persistence and conviction. And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast, Founder Stories. Remember, legends may die, but their stories never do. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.